Hi, everyone, and welcome to ProWritingAid 101 for business writers. I'm Micah McGuire, ProWritingAid's B2B Digital Marketing Manager, and today I'm here with Tom Wilde, who is our Head of Client Solutions. It is awesome to see everyone here today. We are super excited to get this session started. For today's agenda, we are going to be going over some of the most important reports for business writers, including our real-time checker, our goals tool, our summary report, readability report, style report, and our sticky sentences report. We may also be touching on our Google Chrome extension very quickly, just to show you a little bit of what the tool looks like outside of our web editor, because most of our users do use it a lot in browsers. And then, of course, we always like for these sessions to be driven by what you guys would like to know. So we're going to be reserving the last 5 or 10 minutes of the session for Q&A. Please feel free to pop any of your questions in the Q&A box at any point during the session. We will try to hit on them, as many of them as we can. And if we don't get the chance to get to your question, go ahead and feel free to email us at hello@prowritingaid.com. Again, that's hello, H-E-L-L-O, @prowritingaid.com. And we will make sure to get back to you as soon as we can. Just pop in the subject line that you were an attendee for our Business 101, and Tom and I will get back to you. From there, I think we're ready to get started on the demo. Tom, over to you.
Great, thank you, Micah. Welcome everybody. It's great to have a group of a nice small group of participants tonight. It's always nice. So do, as Micah says, fire in your questions as we go, and we'll tackle those as we travel along. Right, so for this evening, what I'm going to, for today, I keep forgetting, I mean, it's in the evening in the UK here in Brighton, but I know in other parts of the world it's early morning or mid-afternoon.
We need a new version of a term that we can just cover remotely of,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Hello everyone, regardless of what time zone you're in.
Exactly. So for today's demonstration and walkthrough, what we're going to do is exactly as Micah says, we're going to look first and foremost at the web editor, and then we'll look at some of the reports, look at some of the functionality there, and we should get time to dip into the Chrome extension too, but we have got a ton of integrations for you. So wherever you write, ProWritingAid is designed to be there, kind of like the editor on your shoulder. And it is it's a rich tool. There's a lot to ProWriting, and we really recommend you spend time getting to know the reports and the functionality and the strengths. Everybody writes in a different way. Everyone's got their own strengths and weaknesses. Everybody writes differently, and there is value in ProWritingAid, but the aim of this session is helping you identify where that value is. So what reports to run, what buttons to press, what settings to set, and so on. Let's kick off just by sharing my screen, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Okay, so here is our web editor tool, and I've got a document open. This is just a sample email that I use in demonstrations I do. So an email to a customer or a supplier, actually. First thing I want to point out is our settings right up here in the middle of the ribbon. With the settings button, you can set what kind of English you are using. Is that US, UK English, Canadian English, Australian English? We only do English at the moment. We are looking at other languages, and we should bring Spanish online soon. But that's the language setting. We've got a couple of other settings. We've got your writing style. That really means what kind of writing are you doing? Are you in the realm of business writing? Are you a creative writer? Are you in academia, doing academic writing? They're all slightly different. And you can even select your document type here too. So if I'm a business writer, am I writing a business book, a business case, maybe an email or marketing text, and so on. And what that does is slightly alter some of the settings, some of the tolerances in the reports that we'll come on to see. Right, back to the actual core function of the tool. So ProWritingAid is designed to help you find the spots, the parts of your writing that you could tighten up, that you could improve. It won't only look for corrections. So it's not just looking for typos and grammar mistakes. It's also looking for things that are subjective. And the first thing we always recommend is turning on the real-time checker. This button here, top left-hand corner. And it doesn't matter which integration you're using. If you're in the Microsoft Word add-in, the Chrome extension, the Google Docs add-on. This layout, this UI is the same. So you'll have this real-time button up there. Click the real-time checker on, and you will see immediately a left-hand toolbar appears, a number, a ticker starts counting up in the corner here. You can see I'm at 36, and the document itself will be full of highlights. Now, the number here shows you how many possible mistakes or improvements we've identified, ProWritingAid has found. So that's what the AI is searching for and what it's found. Each of those issues, improvements, mistakes is highlighted, or rather underlined, in the document. Okay, and as I hover over each of those highlights, you'll see I get a message. Now I'm going to come on to that in a minute, because before we start looking at the improvements, I want to look at a really brand new feature in ProWritingAid with the real-time checker, and that's goals. So you'll see this left-hand sidebar on my screen, and I've got two tabs. I've got goals and I've got improvements. I've got goals open at the moment. What goals is doing is giving me a range of scores, a range of metrics against preset criteria for that particular document type. So my goals will vary depending on what type of document I'm critiquing. Okay. And you can see goals are divided into kind of two categories, if you like. There are goals that are in this kind of orangey gold. Those are the ones where I'm not quite hitting my target. And there are goals in green. That's where I'm on target. So grammar, spelling, and style. I've got a score of 42% for my grammar, spelling, and style in this document. I should be aiming, this bubble here, this target zone tells me I should be aiming for 80% or higher. So I've got some work to do with grammar, spelling, and style. Sentence length, my average sentence length is 19.6 words per sentence. Okay, that's too high, too long. My target should be between 11 and 18. And these are targets we set based on the huge amounts of data analysis that we do, and also what's commonly kind of accepted in the business writing, whichever kind of realm we're talking about.
And all of that is going to vary depending on your settings. So if you have general settings, the analysis and the comparison is going to differ than, say, if you showed a business email. In fact, Tom, why don't we go to a general business email and show the users how that's changing a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great idea. So you'll see that some of the issues here are the same, grammar, spelling, style, but I've also got this style guide compliance tab here. And as I go down through the document, through the report, sorry, there are things that are really related only to email here. Positivity is a brand new one. Okay, is this email positive enough? Am I using enough positive language? And like Micah says, these will vary slightly, subtly, depending on which kind of document type you've set. Okay, if you want a bit more of an explanation on each of these goals, just click here and it'll open an explanation about what the goal is trying to help you with, what the focus of it is. And this is a really important part about ProWritingAid, and I'll come on to talk about this in a little bit more detail later on, but it's just about the fact that we don't see ourselves, ProWritingAid is not a sticking plaster, it's not an elastoplast, okay? It's not meant to be a quick fix, it's meant to help you build your skills and capability. So it takes you from being a good writer to being a great writer, okay? And it also means that you can really focus on the content, on the structure of what you're writing. We take care of, you know, we sweat the small stuff, the grammar, the spelling, the stuff that computers, the AI is really good for spotting, patterns and so on. Okay, so we've given you an introduction to goals. Like we say, that's brand new. Let's have a look at the improvements I can actually make in the document using this real-time checker. And there are two ways I can do that. I can just highlight and hover over each of these highlights in the document and make a change. It's really easy to make a change. Let's go from the first one. So here it's seen an unknown word. So it's spotted a typo. It believes that this is the correct version of the spelling. If I want to accept, I can just click anywhere here. If I want to accept and automatically move to the next suggestion, I just click on this arrow and it will take me to the next one. Okay, so I'm missing a determiner here. Not sure what a determiner is. I can actually click here and it will explain what a determiner is. So here's the inbuilt learning. And there in some of these, again, I'll show you these as we go. We've incorporated and integrated video, quizzes, and other kind of interactive elements to help reinforce the learning. Okay, so I'm going to make this change. move on. And what you'll notice actually as I make these changes, the scores in my goals will recalibrate. So as I make enough changes, I'm improving grammar, spelling, and style. So this is all happening as you work. It's happening in real time. That's a really important element. As I said, some of these are subjective, so they're readability or style elements. So you may not agree with it. If you don't agree and you want to keep the writing as it is, you can just ignore. Okay, if I click on ignore, it will ignore that repeatedly. So if I now close that particular document, reopen it, it'll remain ignored. You also, as you probably saw there, let's see if I can open another example. Here, we can have a disable rule option as well. Now, disable rule is a permanent change. So if you disable a rule, that is disabling it at your account level, and you can't undisable. We can do that from a settings point of view on our support desk, but just be wary. We recommend ignoring rather than disabling unless you're absolutely certain you want to turn a particular rule off. Now, I mentioned we can make changes in a couple of ways, and I've shown you how to edit down through the document itself. But if we open the improvements tab here in the sidebar, I can do exactly the same here. And this is just a preferencing. So I can work down through this, expanding each suggestion as I go. Make the change, move down to the next suggestion, make the change, move on, and so on. It's really just a personal preference. One thing I haven't pointed out yet is our filter here. Over here with the filter, I can select. So if I only want to show spelling errors, I can just select that. Really useful if you're focusing, and as editors, it does sometimes help to be able to focus on one specific point, particularly if you're working on a long document. A lot of our users use that. Okay, right, so that's a real-time checker. You probably noticed that there are all sorts of other buttons across the top of the ribbon here, and each of those relates to another report, and it's a deep report about a specific language point. Now, what we don't recommend is getting to the end of a paragraph or a chapter or a document, whatever, and running each of those reports. It's simply not relevant, okay? And it's also going to take up a huge amount of your time. The idea is that you become familiar with which of the reports mean and deliver the value to you. You'll see some of these reports are much more related to creative writers, fiction writers, and so on. If you're a business writer, you're more likely to be interested in things like style, grammar, overused or repeats, readability. Sticky sentences is one of my favorites, so I'll show you that in a minute. So get to understand which of those reports are most valuable to your particular writing style. The best way to do that is starting with the summary report. Now, the summary report is like a version of goals really on steroids. So it goes into an even greater level of detail about your scores. Okay, so we've got grammar, style, and spelling. We store those combined in goals. Here they're separated, and they are the 3 headline scores we put at the top of the summary report in every document. Beneath the summary, the 3 headline scores, we group your scores by what you're doing well. So I'm hitting a good readability grade here. Top end, my target is less than 10, and I'm bang on 10. Sentence variety, passive voice, these things I'm all doing okay at. They're all good. And then I've got these areas where my document needs more work. So we know some of these already. We've also got things like positivity I mentioned, and the glue index, which relates to that sticky sentences report I'm going to come on to. Now, clicking on any of these scores here will take you down to the section in the in the summary report. It gives you a bit more context. And we use a lot of kind of images here to help build that understanding. Here's a really good example. Our readability score just uses a simple pie chart to show you paragraph by paragraph how much of your document is difficult or very difficult to read. So you can see I've got some, I don't know exactly how many, but some very difficult to read paragraphs in my document. So although my readability grade is okay, I could improve that further. Once I've been through the summary report and got a feel for which things I need to focus on, then you can go to the other report and run the relevant ones. So let's look first at readability.
And Tom, just a note on the summary report, that
Yeah.
is really great if you tend to be a visual learner, simply because we have some more visual assets under those reports. I think the sentence length report, for example, will give you a bar chart of how long each of your sentences are. Say your cadence down for a
Yeah.
certain paragraph or something like that. Looking at that in real time can kind of help. So that's kind of the separation between the goals tool versus the summary report. Is the summary report's just a little bit more in depth, provides a little bit more detail and some more learning opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of detail in the summary report, and you're absolutely right. There's some really great images and graphics in there that help you understand those points. Okay, so readability. So what I'm looking at here, what it's telling me is first and foremost some top line scores. So we know there are lots of readability measurements and readability indexes out there. You may use them within your organization, you may not. The common ones are things like Flesch Reading Ease, Flesch Kincaid grade. We use the Flesch Reading Ease at ProWritingAid. And you can see it's given me a score for that here. So I'm hitting 63.2. We aim for kind of 60 as a bare minimum, preferably higher. Now, as I go further down in the sidebar here, we can see that I've also got these difficult to read. In fact, it's only one very difficult to read paragraph. As I click on it, click the arrow, it'll take me to it and highlight that particular paragraph. Now, paragraph readability. So the Flesch Reading Ease score, sorry, looks at the number of words per sentence and the number of syllables per word, and works out your score based on those figures. So what it's telling you is your reader has a higher chance of struggling with this paragraph than other paragraphs in this document. How do you improve readability score? Well, you can do one of several things. You could cut down the sentence length, the average sentence length. So look for the long sentences in that paragraph and reduce them, make them 2 sentences. Maybe even split the paragraph into 2, or improve some of the vocabulary. So simplify some of the vocabulary, reduce the number of syllables, average syllables per word. And in order to do that, you could just do that manually. You could make those changes now. I could see what I could do. How to split that up, and I can run the report again. Or here's where the other reports come in useful. Because if I go into things like the style report, it's going to look at things like the jargon, passive voice, style improvements that I could improve that will improve readability. So the style report's a really important one for business writers generally. You can see it lists, categorizes each of the core elements of what we call style. So I've got readability enhancements here. Let's have a look at some of these. So readability enhancements, I can go, I've got the majority of here. So rather than saying the majority of, just say most. Okay, simple change. Right, so let's move to the next one. I've got month or so. Okay, so I'm being very general there. I could improve the readability just by removing the or so, shortening that sentence. So you can see it's starting to help me improve individual sentences. Thus far, this is a great one. Why do we say thus far? It actually delivers no extra information to the reader. We're just taking up their time. So remove it. Just replace it with the. Things like this are going to have an impact on style, your style score, but also your readability score. We talked about passive voice earlier, and we've found 4 examples of the passive here. Let's take a look at one of them. Okay, so the proposition has been accepted by the majority of our stakeholders, is written in a passive voice, or in the passive voice. How do we know that? How does the AI know that? Well, it's looking for where you swap the object and the subject, and you've used the verb to be as an auxiliary, so been accepted. Now, if I'm not sure what the passive voice is, again, this is where the ProWritingAid kind of learning element comes in. Click on the information icon. Here's a whole section about the passive and active voice, a link to a full article, but also a link to a great little video using some Jackie Chan quotes to illustrate the difference between the passive and the active voice. So really kind of immerse yourself in that, and it helps build your skills. As you can see, it's also suggested a couple of rewrites of that sentence in the active voice. So I could choose one of those, make the change. Once again, I'm improving it. So it's kind of
Well, Tom, we might want to note on the style report that unlike, say, something like the grammar and spelling report, these are not necessarily mistakes. You know, I think we all have run into cases where, say, the passive voice is actually warranted. You know, it's rare, but we do run into it on occasion. So think of this report as suggestions in order to improve your writing. These are not necessarily call outs of saying, you know, you're wrong here, like it would be with, say, a spelling error or a grammar error. It's much more of a suggestion of, you know, this could go one way or another. So I think, you know, it's always useful to keep that in mind, that ultimately still you are the writer behind this document. You know, it's not a matter of just accepting all the suggestions blindly. It's, you know, everyone has their own personal style and everyone writes differently.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really worthwhile reiterating that point. This is not picking up necessarily any mistakes. And you can see that here, right? There's nothing wrong with the using "we certainly believe," but we know from our research that actually adverbs are much more powerful when they're used sparingly. Don't overuse them, otherwise they become diluted. So do you want to move it? Well, actually, maybe I want to emphasize that. Maybe I want to leave that one. So I'll leave that one for now. But as we go through each of these, you can just make the call on each individual one. All these efforts, does it actually add anything? Or am I just taking up more brain space? Am I just giving my reader more cognitive kind of overload, as it were? Make the change and move on. But you're right, Mike, you're absolutely right. These are subjective elements of writing. Okay, let's move on and have a look at a couple more. First, I want to do sticky sentences. Sticky sentences, as I said, is one of my favorites, and it's totally unique to ProWritingAid. Sticky sentences is looking for glue words, right? And glue words are the 200 most commonly used words in the English language. So they're kind of everyday prepositions and articles, and they're the glue in a sentence, but quite often they don't give us any context. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, let's just hide the semi-sticky sentences. We'll focus on sticky sentences. Okay, so here we've got a sticky sentence. Now, the sticky sentence report, it measures the percentage of words in your sentence that are glue words, and the trigger is 40%. So if more than 40% of your words are glue words, those 200 most commonly used words, then it's going to report that sentence as a sticky sentence, meaning it could potentially slow your reader down or stick them. Right, have a look at the glue words here. Just, wanted, to, back, about, the, around, last. Read those glue words on their own. They don't mean anything. They don't tell you the context. That's because the working words, okay, the words like project and month, talked, they're the working words in a sentence. They're the words you need to be able to understand the meaning of the sentence. So we know that if you've got a high proportion of glue words in a sentence, the chances are you could say the same thing, but in far fewer words. And once again, if you do that, you're saving your reader time. And in the business world, people, you know, they're not paid to read what you've written. They want you to be concise. They want you to be clear. They want you to get to the point. So if I were to rewrite that sentence, I might just say, yeah, I might completely rewrite it and just saying, just coming back to you about the project. Something really simple, or just about the project we discussed last month. Okay, get to the point. Cut out your glue words. Go for it, Micah.
It's just, this is also a good place to show that there's really no one right way to rewrite these sentences too. It all comes down to how you personally, you know, write. Again, we're back to everyone has a different writing style. So everyone will probably, if you gave 100 people the same sticky sentence, you'd probably see it rewritten 100 different ways. So this report is really just making you aware of areas that could improve your clarity, because that's often what happens whenever we get rid of these sticky sentences and these semi-sticky sentences, is we're a much clearer, more concise phrasing of what you were originally trying to say.
Yeah, Absolutely right. And that's one of the reasons why we're not trying to rewrite sticky sentences for you, right? It's quite difficult to do that. And like Micah says, there are hundreds of ways you can do that. For me, business writing should always be driven by your reader. Who is your reader? Think about that first and foremost before diving into your writing. That is going to help you make sure that the reader, whoever they are, agrees with you, okay? Or, yeah, they understand what you're trying to tell them because you've thought about them. You've thought about the kind of language you should be using. Are they someone that's going to appreciate short, clear sentences? Okay, do you need to be more descriptive? All those kind of things that should be firing in your mind when you come to write anything. It's who's your reader that defines it.
And that really is going to be a huge help in any of your communication endeavors, simply because the better you understand the reader, the better you're able to communicate, and therefore the easier it is to get agreements on things like these back and forth emails and things like that. So imagine, instead of having to go back 15 times on a certain email, if you were able to reduce that to 3, and that's really what the power is of writing clearly and writing with your reader in mind.
Yeah, and there's a reputation point here, isn't there? You build a reputation, not just amongst customers, but also internally, as someone who is clear and confident in their communication. If that's the case, people are much more likely not to leave your email to the, or move it to the bottom of the pile, but actually get to it because they know you're going to deliver news, whatever it is, quickly and efficiently. Right. So you can see I've rewritten that sentence. I've run the sticky sentence report again. It's no longer reporting as a sticky sentence. So I'm really pleased. We move on. But you get the idea. So we run each of these reports as we want to, and understand where the value is for me. Just a quick one. I probably shouldn't squeeze this one, but it's another really useful one. Just all repeats. Now this is looking for multi-word phrases, and it's what computers are great at and human eye isn't particularly good at. It's looking for where you're repeating yourself, either on individual words. So you can see I've got all my single words I'm using the most here. But actually what's really useful here, and don't worry too much about the colors in this report, look at the sidebar. Right, here we go. 3-word phrases and 2-word phrases. I'm using a bit 5 times in this document, okay, 5 times. Now, in a short document, that's going to come across as quite repetitive. Anything that's repetitive is going to make my reader lose interest, and therefore I'm losing their attention. As I look through each of those, the ProWritingAid tool, the kind of the engine is looking for alternative ways of phrasing that. So here are some alternative possible suggestions to use instead of a bit, just to vary your writing a little bit. It's really a demonstration of a really useful tool that, like I say, the human eye isn't particularly good, particularly if you're reading and proofing your own work. You're not able to see things like repetition or common mistakes very easily.
Yeah, because how many times have you read over your own work and seen in the same paragraph that you repeated the same word twice, and that it doesn't come up until usually you've sent the email.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sends a shiver down my spine because I can picture the times I've done it before now and hit send, and then you read it back and go, why didn't I see that at the time? I proofed it 3 times.
But as you said, that's where computers really have the advantage. So it can help you kind of identify those. And from there, you can kind of say, okay, do I need to just maybe delete that? Or do I need to use a different phrasing? That kind of thing. And that'll be a huge help in varying your writing. And ProWritingAid's engine will probably give you some suggestions that maybe you don't use regularly, that you go, actually, this would be a really good fit here. Because it's just, we all fall into patterns of using certain phrases and things like that. It's why, creative writers have their authorial style, that we all have those things that we tend to rely on. So sometimes having extra suggestions can be a help.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I'm just going to move on now, Mike. I think we've been through a few reports. So we're going to look at now a couple of functions that are particularly built for business users and teams. Okay, and the first is Style Guide, our Style Guide tool. So Style Guide allows you to build rules, that are that customize ProWritingAid. So here you can build your own rules around particular grammar points or spellings or items of vocabulary you want to kind of rule out. Let me give you an example. So we've built an awful lot of reports, style guide rules in the past for customers. A really simple example here is one we wrote for Pennsylvania University. So, the University of Pennsylvania. There's the mistake, right? So the customer said, well, look, all of our staff, all of our undergraduates, and faculty slip into a bad habit of using the term Pennsylvania University, but that's not our brand. Our brand is University of Pennsylvania. So how do we create a rule that in every document written by one of our staff or one of our students highlights where the name is misused? It's really straightforward. So we create 4 fields. There are 4 fields for a style guide rule. Wrong sentence. So here we just write an example of a wrong sentence. So we're helping the AI understand the structure of the sentence. And in the match, we're telling it exactly what to look for. So here, the example wrong sentence, it could be anything, but it includes the term Pennsylvania University. And that's a specific match we want the AI to identify. When it finds that term, and only that term, it's got to be an exact match, then it's going to suggest a replacement of the University of Pennsylvania. And included in that is going to be a message. So here's a message I've written for the user. Never use Pennsylvania University. Our brand name is University of Pennsylvania. Now, this is an example of a simple rule. Rules can get incredibly complex. I'll show you in a second. Whatever you do, always test the rule to make sure it returns a positive result. It's in green, so that's good. Save the rule. And then, in fact, we're just going to go back into our, just open that again, grab that, go back into our sample, we're just going to stick that sentence in the middle here, turn on the real-time checker, and there you go. See, it's underlined in yellow. That indicates it's a style issue. But this is the rule I created. So I'm customizing ProWritingAid for my team's or my organization's specific needs. Here's the message I wrote. Here's the simple swap. If I click on that, there we go. I've made the change. Now, like I said, style guide rules can get incredibly complex. We can use regular expression to create rules. You can see some of the examples here. Slightly more difficult where I'm swapping adjectives in front of specific words for pharmaceutical company. So instead of using good or bad to describe a reagent, we want the replacement of appropriate or inappropriate. I don't have time to go into the detail of how we build the more complex rules here, but we've got resources on our site. You can contact us to support you with this at any point.
And we also have a couple of articles. We have a Style Guide 101 article, as well as an advanced Style Guide article. Both of those are going to be linked in the chat, so if you'd like to take a look there. And I'm afraid that it is not wanting to copy over our simple Style Guide rules, but let's see. There we go. So now we have both the simple style guide rules and the advanced style guide rules articles, and you can take a look through those if you'd like to get started on working on building your own style guide rules.
Yeah, before we move on, just going to show you this quick example. So this is a relevant one because there's lots of discussion all the time about the use of the Oxford or the serial comma. Does your style define that you should use it or you shouldn't use it? And actually, we can create rules here, and we use parts of speech tags, POS tags, which is something that if you're a linguist, you'll be familiar with. But we're basically telling the engine, telling the AI here to look for a series of nouns or verbs in succession. This is what these tags, these codes mean. Now, singular, plural noun or verb, followed by a comma, followed by singular, plural noun or verb, followed by a coordinating conjunction, then a possible determiner, and then a singular or plural noun or verb. And the replacement, all we're doing there is telling the computer, replace the whole string, but introduce this comma in the right place. And that's going to introduce your Oxford comma. I know that's a really quick look at that and probably quite confusing, but it just shows you that actually it's a really powerful tool and it can be used to great effect. In fact, recently, APA, so the American Psychological Association, have used our style guide tool to build into one of their own products, Academic Writer, their entire rule set. So it's powered by ProWritingAid, which is something we're obviously delighted with.
And Tom, I think we just got a great question, which I think leads into the next tool that we're going to be talking about, that can the style guide be used as a text expander?
Ah, right. Well, yeah, that's a perfect question because I'm about to go on to snippets, right? And snippets is our text expander. So no need to use a style guide. You can actually use snippets. The snippets, like the style guide tool, you can use both of those to create your personal rules or snippets, or also, as you can see here, team rules, so ProWritingAid rules. So if you've got rules that you want to share amongst all the users in your organization, you don't each need to create those. You just group all the users under a team and you will share anything you've got here in your shared snippets folder. And it's really great. I mean, we've got some really obvious things in here, just like our company address, right? How many times have you been writing something where you've had to write out your company address? It's just a really essential text expander tool. How does it work? Again, it's really straightforward. You just write the text that you want here. You can format it. Then you create a shortcut, okay? And once you've created the shortcut, you can go into your document and use the shortcut, which in our case is a /. Start writing the name of the snippet. So that one was an email for welcoming new users to a trial. Press return, and there it's dropped in the entire snippet. So that's what you want to use. If you need a text expander, snippets is perfect.
And all of that is rich text formatted. So if you need to add any kind of formatting like bold, italics, underlining, or add links, you have the opportunity to do that as well. So you can use it for email signatures, any number of things, just as long as your text input box will accept rich text, you have it right there.
Yeah. And I mentioned there, talking about snippets, I mentioned that you can have team snippets just like you can have team style guide rules. In terms of having a team, it's really simple. We link all of your users under a team. So you can see here my ProWritingAid team. You can see as an administrator, I can control my team. I can set their position, whether they're a user or an administrator. I can even invite more members. So maybe one of my team has left, I remove their license and I'm reassigning it to a new user. That's entirely up to you. It's really flexible from that point of view. So if you've got a large team, you want to manage a number of licenses, it's really simple in our team user management dashboard. Okay, where does that leave us? I think one thing we talked about the Chrome extension. Let's have a quick look at the Chrome extension. So I use Gmail in Chrome, and you can see here I've got exactly the same message. Excuse me, the email message I was working on earlier, but it's in Chrome. I've got the Chrome extension installed up here. So you can see I've got it turned on, it's enabled. I've got text expansion, so snippets is enabled. I've got my language, so I can set my language or my writing style again here. And it's doing exactly the same. It's looking, so the real-time checker is on already. It's looking for those mistakes, exactly what you saw with the real-time checker in the web editor tool. Then if I want to go into those deeper reports, if I go down to here and click on this target icon, it's actually going to open the ProWritingAid UI within Chrome. So it'll take a second or two, but there we go. So you can see I've got exactly the same user interface, exactly the same reports, and I can do exactly the same work, just as I did in the web editor, but here within Chrome. So really versatile. You'll also notice that, the real-time checker that I showed you, this will integrate with many, many web apps. We do a lot of testing, Salesforce, HubSpot, LinkedIn. If you're using those items in Chrome or any other major browser, because we have extensions for most browsers, you will see our real-time checking tool will work there as well, highlighting the grammar, spelling, style issues as you go.
In fact, I think we have coverage for every browser out there except for Internet Explorer. But I think Microsoft may be retiring that one fairly soon. So
yeah, we've got Edge covered instead.
Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Safari.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I think that's most of the functions of ProWritingAid. I know that's a whistle-stop tour, so if you've got questions, please feel free to ask them now. We've taken up about 40 minutes of your time so far, so probably a good time to hand over and go through a few questions, Micah.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got some great ones that we've gotten during the walkthrough. The first one is actually a very interesting point about in the settings, whenever you are looking at, say, the different dialects, UK versus Australian versus American English, there is a setting for general English. What does that kind of use as a baseline for, let's say the OR versus OUR spelling of color?
Okay, so general English is like it's like anything goes, right? In terms of it's not going to flag any discrepancies between language types. So it wouldn't flag a misspelling of center RE where it's written UK style as opposed to US style. It considers all of them correct. As long as it's a recognizable term, it won't flag whether it's an incorrect it's specific incorrect version.
Very, very cool. So if you're writing for a very generalized audience that will probably understand, regardless of which spelling you're using, you could use general English. But if you have a very targeted audience, say you're writing to individuals in the UK, you're writing to individuals in Australia or Canada or the US, probably worth it to turn those checks on just so there's nothing that kind of hits them out of the blue, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely that.
And we had another excellent one that is from one of our writers that I think deals with a lot more technical subjects. That he's saying that he has difficulty with the readability report, kind of flagging a lot of his writing as difficult to read simply because he has to use a lot of jargon because he is a technical writer. Do you have any suggestions for things that can kind of help when you're dealing with industries that are a little bit jargon heavy, that it's quite frankly a little difficult to avoid using jargon in your writing?
Yeah, great question. And this goes back to this point that, jargon itself isn't the bogeyman, right? It's not actually, people shouldn't be the issue isn't necessarily with jargon. It comes back to who your reader is. And in technical writing, you're absolutely right. Jargon is expected and required. So, again, find the reports that are relevant to you. Now, that's not to say that you may even as a technical writer be overusing jargon. So there may be merit in the readability report, but you need to kind of lower your tolerances if you like. And you will know what's acceptable. So with the readability measure, you might have a lower benchmark in terms of readability that you can work to. But really, it comes back to that point about using ProWritingAid for your purposes and knowing what your strengths and your weaknesses are. We have plenty of technical writers and plenty of technical writing teams. In fact, we've just built an integration for ArborText, which is a technical writing documentation program. And they still get a lot of value, particularly with things like style, particularly with things like grammar. They create a lot of their own customized style reports. Even things like, the repeats checker, again, although jargon's acceptable, there is still fine that they are using language that is overly repetitive. So I'm sorry if that's a bit of a kind of broad answer, but I think it's really about understanding that your tolerances, your target areas, if you like, are going to be different.
And I think it's also worth it to make sure that you're checking your settings too, because I believe we have some more documents that might be more on the technical end within our settings, correct?
Well, you can certainly, under business writing style, you can set technical here. Yeah, absolutely. It's still going to, when you're running things like the style report, it's still going to highlight jargon or because it's checking, it's looking to say, okay, is this necessary? So you could actually, going back to that point, you could use things like ignore, possibly disable, or you could, if you're a team, actually use the term-based function. So if you've got specific product terminology or terminology that might ordinarily flag as a possible typing mistake, you can upload a term base. So if you've got a term base in a CSV file or an Excel file, you can upload that and it becomes like a shared dictionary. And it's basically setting preferred spelling versions so your document wouldn't flag those words as possible typos. So that's something else to consider.
Okay, we have another good one that is about the difference between, I believe, the RealTime Checker sidebar and the summary report. And I think we kind of touched on a little bit about the summary report providing some more detail, but let's go ahead and dig into a bit more about how that summary report does differ from your goals sidebar.
Yeah, that's a great point. Okay, so we touched on the fact that summary report gives you all the scores. Okay, so it's giving you, a wider number of scores than you would get in the goals sidebar. And it's also giving you a lot more detail. So you've got the headline, you've got the scores on their own up here. But as I scroll down through the document itself, so I can either scroll or I can click on one of these reports and it'll take me to that part of the report. You can see I've got a whole load of information there. So here it's specifically actually listing in order some of the first grammar mistakes in the document. As I go down, it's doing the same for my writing style check. So it's saying these are the things, the readability issues under writing style. You mentioned, Micah, some of the graphics, I think, around sentence length. So here's the sentence length report. So this looks chronologically at the order of your document and the length of each sentence within it. So this is a great way of not only spotting, my word, I've got 2 sentences here that are over 40 words, right? You try and read a 40-word sentence, I guarantee before you get to the end, you'll have gone back to the beginning to try and remember what you was when you started. But it also is a great way of looking at sentence variety. Okay, long sentences aren't a bad thing on their own, but you need to have variety. It's rhythm in writing. So
Otherwise, you might end up coming off a bit like Victor Hugo in your emails. So
exactly that, exactly. And you'll see some of the things here, right, are more relevant for creative writers, fiction writers. There's the readability check I mentioned earlier. Sentence structure. So this is a conjunction starts to your sentence. So some of these things are more relevant to story writers. So again, it's understanding where the value is for you.
And really, you'll come to learn that as you run your kind of goals tool and run the summary reports, you'll start seeing that in general, you kind of end up with probably between 3 and 5 reports that you regularly need to run. I mean, generally, I think it's good practice for everyone to run the spelling and grammar report, even if you're only running it on a super short document, like maybe a paragraph long email, just because our eyes have a bad tendency to skip over certain points, and the computer is going to be much better at identifying those. So that I would say, if you're going to bare minimum run 1 report, at least run your grammar and spelling report. But certain other ones, that style report can be very useful. The readability report can be useful, especially if you're writing on longer documents. If you tend to be in an industry that does have a lot of technical terms, I bet that repeats report would be useful in identifying certain phrases where maybe you could condense those or omit some of the technical terminology if you've already mentioned it within a close range. So really, it comes down to the type of writing you do, and the more you run the program, the more you run that summary report, the more you look at where your goals are kind of panning out each time you write, the better you'll be used to getting a grip on which reports you should run.
Yeah.
We've got another question touching back on the term base of, we had kind of discussed a little bit about jargon. Can you define terms within the term base that would be kind of jargon terms that would let that kind of add it to the dictionary for you?
Yeah, exactly that. So the term base is like a team dictionary, really. So if you look in as an individual user, I can add terms here to my dictionary. So essentially, I could say, actually, that's how I wanted to spell this word. That's a recognized term, so I'm going to add it to my dictionary. For teams, you can't do that. You use the term base instead, and the term base is actually much more powerful. So let's have a quick look at it. I'll just take you there via this route. So here is the term base function. You can see I just go to my sidebar in my account. There's a template here. So the template allows me, this is an uploaded, so this is a template I completed and uploaded. So you can see I've got terms like counterproductive leadership in my term base. Okay, and that means that that term wouldn't be flagged for any reason. It wouldn't be flagged as an unknown word. It wouldn't be flagged, or an unknown pair of words. And in fact, it gives a description of it too. So that becomes an accepted term, what we call a preferred term. Now, in the term-based preferred terms, there are also deprecated terms. So you can see I've got the term toxic leadership in my term-based too. And so where the term toxic leadership were seen, it would flag that as a deprecated term and actually suggest using counterproductive leadership as well. And if I were to show you, I don't have the CSV file here, but essentially it's a range of columns that you complete where you list whether something is a preferred term or a deprecated term. And so you can highlight terms so they're accepted spellings, or you can highlight terms where they should be updated, i.e. you're using in deprecated terms. You can also include acronyms in there. And so, you know, we have a client that recently uploaded over 30,000 acronyms. And they include the acronym and they include the full version of the acronym as well. So the acronym is then accepted, but it's also under our acronym reports, it will then find where the acronym hasn't been introduced for the first time, for example, or maybe you've used the full term and you could use the acronym because you've already introduced the acronym. So we haven't really gone into this, but it's linked to our term-based checker. It's a really powerful part, particularly if you're working in a technical field where the use of acronyms is high.
Yeah. And Tom, I think we've got time for just one more question. We have a question from a user that writes a lot of copy for social media accounts. And she's wondering if there is a setting that she can use to compare social copy. And I believe we have a marketing setting, correct?
Yeah, well, so we've got a couple of settings here. Web and casual are both probably most relevant for social accounts. And there's subtle differences in those. Okay, so the best thing is to have a play around with them, see which suits your requirements more. But it really, you'll see the differences in, like we said before, in the goals that are listed and in tolerances around some of the scores. But really, most of our social companies that are using us for managing social media, they're using casual or the web setting.
And I think that wraps it up for our Q&A. Guys, we're going to have a couple of extra links that we're going to put in. I am going to include a guide to our snippets tool in the chat. And then I'd also like to include just a link to our email newsletter sign up if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter and you aren't already. And finally, just let everyone know we are actually about to kick off a customer service spotlight tomorrow. So we are having a webinar in which our resident business professor, AJ, is going to be interviewing GQ Fu, who is an expert in customer service. He is the CEO and co-founder of customer service outsourcing company LTV Plus. So we really think it's going to be a great session. GQ has been a fantastic partner with us. We're really all looking forward to it. That kicks off tomorrow at 10 a.m. Eastern. If you would like to make sure that you are able to get the replay for that session, please sign up via Zoom. I have just included a link to the registration page, and that will get you on to make sure that you have a replay, even if you can't make it live, but we would love to have you join us live. That's the first of 3 events that we're having in the next couple of weeks directed at customer service. We have 2 more coming up next week. We have one on the 2nd that is going to be cracking the customer communication code. That's going to be kind of a teardown with our customer service pros of how to answer customer service replies. And then we also have next week a webinar with several partners that is going to be on customer service automation. So I'll be including the webinar pages for those registrations there. And then we'll also actually have a couple of bonus events coming up at the end of the month. Live Chat and Churn Zero are both going to be joining us at the end of the month for a couple of webinars. Live Chat is going to be building better knowledge bases, and Churn Zero is going to be on covering some user onboarding strategies. So if you work in customer service or customer support, we would love to have you on with us. Just keep an eye out on our business writing page for all of the resources and events. Thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks all.